You're listening to The Observing Eye. Pirate radio for the mind. Coming at you fresh from the computer hell cabin.
Hello, you beautiful lot. It's Friday, the 5th of January, 2024, and you are listening to another episode of The Observing Eye, coming at you live from the computer hell cabin. As always, I like to begin these episodes with a brief moment of reflection. So, let's take a moment to consider the good things that have happened the past week. And now a moment for the not so good. Happy New Year to all of my listeners. I hope you have had a fabulous holiday break, that you are feeling rested, and that Santa came barreling down your chimney. As it's the new year, I have a little bit of an agenda in mind, and that is to create an episode every week in January that is designed to support you in any sort of changes and growth that you might be looking at in the new year. New Year's a big time for growth, isn't it? Big time for change. We all, sit down and we contemplate and we set resolutions and things that we'd like to improve about ourselves, habits we'd like to start, habits we'd like to stop. So in this next 4 episodes, we're going to be talking through some tools and ideas to give you some advice and guidance on that, and hopefully make the process of change a little bit easier and less daunting. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about the mantra that I'm going to be setting myself this year, and I challenge you to join in with me. Last year, I set myself a mantra at the beginning of the year, and that mantra was do the work. There's a podcast episode I put out on Do the Work, which I will link in the descriptions of this episode as well. It might be worth having a listen to talk around that. But so that's my aim, my goal last year was do the work. And I've been doing the work. And it's been great. It's been liberating. It's been fascinating. And the journey's been a ride. This year, I decided to change it. I want to mix it up a little bit. I feel like I've spent a year doing the work, and I'm still going to be doing the work. But it's really set in. The foundations are solid. So this year's mantra, and I'm going to challenge you to either pick one yourself or maybe even use this. This year's mantra is get comfortable being uncomfortable. The idea is that I set myself this mantra and it becomes my kind of guiding light for the year. And it's something like a totem. I keep coming back to it. I keep using it to remind myself of the important challenge that I've set myself this year. And that is get comfortable being uncomfortable. So what do I mean by that? It's our default nature to exist within our comfort zone. And that's completely understandable. We're going to want to be comfortable. It's our natural state to want to be comfortable. And that's okay in some regards. But if we really want to change, if we really want to generate growth in ourselves, we've got to get outside of that comfort zone a little bit. Imagine that you're out swimming. Yeah. And you've swum to that point where your feet just don't quite touch the bottom of the pool. That's where we want to get to. That's where I want to get to. That is my state of discomfort. I don't want to be so deep that I'm drowning. That's not going to do me anything. That's just going to cause me all sorts of trauma and chaos and shit. I want to get to that point where I'm just a little bit uncomfortable. I'm not quite happy, not quite certain what's going on. Because it's in those spaces of discomfort where real growth happens. There's a Buddhist monk called Pema Chodron, and she wrote in one of her books about change and growth. And she says that we need to be constantly throwing ourselves from the nest. Now, what she means by this is that if we imagine ourselves as a tiny bird relying upon the worms of our mother, sidetrack, a tiny bird in the nest, and we're all comfortable, it's all snug and warm, and people are feeding us, and we're just getting fatter and fatter and not really challenging ourselves. We then have to throw ourselves from the nest to see if we can fly. That's our growth. That's our learning space. Eventually, we're going to land in another nest. And we're going to land in another nest because that comfort zone will expand. The initial sense of discomfort that we feel in throwing ourselves from the nest will cessate once we feel comfortable in that space outside of the nest. And hence we land in another nest because we're comfortable, because we know what we're doing. We know the space that we're in and we know how to navigate it. And because we're comfortable, we can sit here and go, yeah, okay, I've done my growth. I'm happy. I'm chilling. I'm getting fed. I'm warm. It's toasty. Or I can throw myself out the nest again. I can get back into a space where I have to grow, to learn to be uncomfortable. Now, discomfort is very often a sign that we are learning something new. It's this mental and emotional strain that we feel, that we experience when we confront our limitations or face unfamiliar situations. This discomfort, although unsettling, is a natural part of the learning process. It's an indicator that our minds are stretching, adapting, evolving, and getting used to those new challenges that we are putting upon it. Being in those spaces of discomfort also help us to build resilience. So if we regularly put ourselves into that comfort zone, into that discomfort, into the uncomfortable zone, then it's like when we go to the gym and we work out and we're lifting the weights, we're getting the gains, but lifting the weights, part of the process, the muscles feel uncomfortable. And that's exactly what we are trying to do to the mind, to put it in that state of discomfort, to stretch it, to make it grow and become more resilient. So the more that we expose ourselves to challenging situations, the better we become at being able to handle them. If we run away from stress, if we run away from things that we find challenging, then we're never giving our minds the opportunity to learn how to cope with them. I'm not saying you want to throw yourself into something that's intensely stressful and stay there. That's not healthy either. But it is important for our growth to be able to step into that space that causes us some stress and discomfort and experience it and navigate it and learn how to deal with it. And this gives us resilience because when we come across stressful situations in the future, and we will, it is a guarantee in life that you will, our minds are going to become better suited and better adapted to dealing with those future stresses because we've dealt with them before. We're just laying the groundwork. And the more that we are able to handle those stressful situations and the more that we find ourselves in those challenging scenarios, the easier that we're going to be able to navigate them going forwards. So on the surface, initially, while it may be much more comfortable to go, no, fuck this, I'm not putting myself in that situation, maybe step into it. Because a little bit of energy and effort and suffering spent at the beginning will enable us to avoid the same stresses and suffering and discomfort in the future. A little bit of time spent now, a lot of time saved later on. But putting ourselves in a place of discomfort doesn't just give us more resilience. It can also be a fantastic tool for enabling self-awareness. So it's very often that in moments of discomfort that we learn the most about ourselves. Our reactions and our responses to challenging situations can reveal hidden fears, hidden biases, hidden strengths, and offer us valuable insights into who we are and what we value. If we're in that comfort zone, nothing's going to change. We're not stirring the waters. We want to get in that river and smash our feet about a bit and hoof it all up and make it muddy and shitty and see what floats up to the surface. That is being in a state of discomfort. Now, this is all well and good, putting ourselves out of our comfort zone, but how exactly do we go about doing it? Now, obviously, the issue with the comfort zone is that it's comfortable and we want to be there. So I'm going to run through a few little things that you can think about to try and help you to put yourself in a state of discomfort. I feel like I'm giving you advice on how to cause yourself suffering, but it's not. It is, again, we're not talking about massive states of discomfort. We're talking about that just a slight sense of unease and apprehension in getting into a zone that is outside of your sort of normal limits. The first thing then, and I feel that this is some fairly sensible advice, is to start small. If your comfort zone is that you don't like heights, and your challenge to that is to climb up the nearest radio mast and base jump from the top of it. That is not putting yourself out of your comfort zone. We don't want you doing that. That's not cool. When I say we start small, we think of small challenges. If, for example, you don't feel comfortable speaking in a group, then perhaps your challenge to get uncomfortable is to speak up in a group meeting. Maybe you've wanted to get good at cooking for years, but you've never pushed yourself to try it. Maybe challenge yourself to start cooking some stuff. If the first few things turn out to be crap, that's fine. We all have to start somewhere. But you're putting yourself in that place of discomfort. You're in that zone where you're at a sense of unease has befallen you. That's what we're looking for. But it has to be small steps, because these small steps give us the confidence to be able to move on to the larger things afterwards. Another thing you could try is to embrace new things much more openly. So say yes to more stuff, basically. And this could be anything from putting yourself out there to learn something new, like cooking, for example, going to some sort of workshop or training course on something that you're unfamiliar with but are kind of interested in learning. It can be even something as simple as just reading about a topic that's completely outside of your usual interests. Now, we've got to remember that the comfort zone is a bubble that contains all of the nice, snuggly, comfortable things that we like to keep around us. So even something like going and reading something that is totally outside of your usual interest, that can give you stuff, give you ideas and perspectives that you may have never considered before. So just look out there and start seeing things that have interested you, that may interest you, and go and experiment with them and put yourself in those spaces. The worst that's going to happen is that you don't like it, and that's okay. The next thing we need to do when putting ourselves in that space of discomfort is to hold ourselves accountable. If there's no accountability, it is very easy for us to slip back into that comfort zone. The gentle, warm lull of the comfort zone calls us, "Come back to me, my children." You just have to push back against that. You've really got to be like, okay, I'm pushing myself to be uncomfortable. And yeah, I don't really like it. The water's a bit cold. I don't really feel like I'm in a good space. That's where we need to be. And we've got to hold ourselves accountable, because if we don't, then it's going to be way too easy for us to slip back to the comfort. So you can do that by challenging yourself. If you're comfortable to hold yourself accountable, then, maybe keep a journal or something like that, so you can keep track of your behaviors, of what you've been doing and the things you've been exploring and experimenting with. Or get a friend or family member to hold you accountable. They can be your accountability buddy. And just ask them to help support you through your process of getting uncomfortable. For me, part of this getting uncomfortable is to celebrate the effort of being uncomfortable. So when I first started out along this journey many years ago, I definitely had a mindset where I would look at something that I deemed as being uncomfortable, and I would see it as a negative thing. Now, because I associated that negative thought with the state of being uncomfortable, I wouldn't put myself in those uncomfortable spaces so much. What I've learnt over time is to accept and acknowledge and appreciate that those spaces of discomfort are actually a really positive thing. They give me so much more than I could have ever realized when I was younger. So I look at that state of discomfort as a positive. And I celebrate the fact that even though I'm trying to work through these things, and even though I am going to be failing left, right, and center, it's still a positive. It's still a good thing. And I want to continually reinforce that in myself and remind myself that, yeah, it's tough, but it's good tough, It's getting yourself into a space that's going to make you better in the long run. It's pushing back those boundaries and pushing back those boundaries and pushing back those boundaries. Ideally, what I want is for that comfort zone to just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And every time it gets bigger and I feel comfortable, then I move outside of it again. And I stay there until that sense of discomfort becomes comfortable. And I'm used to it and I'm able to navigate that new space. And then I step out of it again. That's the mindset I have around it now. Seeing all of it as a really positive thing, even in those times when it can feel like, oh, fuck, I've had enough. Going back to that thought that, all of this is for the greater good. It's a real morale boosting thing to have in your arsenal. And finally, my last piece of advice, guidance, whatever you want to call this, on getting out of your comfort zone is to stay curious. For me, curiosity is a huge motivator. That inquisitiveness to see what's over the horizon, to dive into spaces that I don't understand, and the things that can come from that. That's a real, probably the biggest push for me, I think, in getting me out of that comfort zone, is finding out what's going to happen. The uncertainty is great. I know initially when you get into this sort of stuff, the uncertainty can be like an absolute roller coaster, and it feels terrifying. But I feel like once you get comfortable doing this, it's weird. You get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? Once you get comfortable doing this, then it just becomes fascinating. You find out stuff about yourself. You find out all sorts of things that you had no idea that you'd be interested in. It's a phenomenal space to exist in. It is a space of continuous growth and learning and improvement, learning about yourself and learning about the world around you. So whilst that comfort zone can be a nice, warm, snuggly blanket, getting into that space of discomfort is where the real magic happens. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all I have to say on the subject of getting comfortable being uncomfortable. As always, I want to thank each and every one of you for taking your time to join me on this little journey of self-exploration and interest. Your time and your energy is greatly appreciated. I'm also always keen to hear what you've got to say on anything that I've talked about in these podcast episodes. If you want to put your voice into the mix, then by all means, you can do that at the home of this podcast, which is theobservingeye.substack.com. You can find us on Instagram at theobservingeye, on TikTok at theobservingeye, and on YouTube, which is youtube.com/at theobservingeye. So the same handle across all of those bad boy social platforms. As is Friday, I'd like to wish you a fabulous first weekend of 2024. For those of you who have been back to work this week, I feel you, and I hope it hasn't been too bad. For those of you going back to work next week, of which I count myself amongst, I hope it is a smooth transition from a period of rest into a period of toil. That sounds ominous, doesn't it? A period of toil, going back to work on the fields, to tend to the lambs. Right, enough. I'm losing it. I'm losing it already. Wishing you all a wonderful one, everybody. Much love, and I'll catch you soon.
You've been listening to The Observing Eye. Thanks for spending some time with me today. I hope that you found it useful. And if you're interested in any more of my writings or work around psychology and philosophy and general day-to-day living, please go and take a look at my Substack, which is theobservingeye.substack.com. And that's I as in the letter, not I as in the gelatinous organ through which you see. Take care, everybody. Much love, and I'll see you soon.